It is 0:30 Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has arrived in Israel. The visit is part of her diplomatic trip concerning Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Ms. Rice traveled to Israel after making a surprise visit to Beirut. She met with Lebanese Prime Minister Fuad Signora to discuss Israel's offensive against Hezbollah. Ms. Rice expressed great concern about what the Lebanese people are experiencing. Ms. Rice meets Tuesday with Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. She then goes to the West Bank for talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Later this week, she will attend an international conference in Rome and meet with European, Arab, and United Nations officials. Israeli troops, supported by military aircraft, have moved into southern Lebanon in an effort to take control of a stronghold of Hezbollah guerrillas. Israeli forces and guerrillas battled near the town of Bent Jbeil. Israeli military officials say 2 soldiers and several Hezbollah fighters were killed. They say at least 13 Israeli troops were wounded in the fighting. 2 Israeli pilots also died when their military helicopter crashed in northern Israel. Israeli air attacks killed at least 7 people in Hezbollah-controlled southern Lebanon, and the guerrilla group injured at least 2 people as it fired more rockets into northern Israel. The United States has announced $30 million in aid for Lebanon. It says American forces will begin sending the supplies on Tuesday. Assistant Secretary of State David Welch says the aid will include medical supplies for 100,000 people and 20,000 blankets. A Bush administration spokesman says the supplies will start arriving in Lebanon by helicopter and ship. The United States announced the aid in reaction to a United Nations appeal for $150 million in aid to civilians in Lebanon affected by the Israeli bombing. Palestinian medical workers say Israeli gunfire killed 6 people in northern Gaza Monday. They say 3 people died when an Israeli shell exploded in the town of Beit Lahia. Later, shelling reportedly killed 2 more Palestinians and a 5-year-old girl. Israeli military officials said the army fired shells after Palestinians fired 6 rockets into Israel. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed since Israel began operations in the Gaza Strip. Israel wants militants to stop firing rockets and free an Israeli soldier kidnapped in late June. The Bush administration is preparing for the president's meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki Tuesday in Washington. The 2 leaders are expected to discuss ways to improve security forces in Iraq. A spokesman says the security plan put into effect in Baghdad 6 weeks ago by Mr. al-Maliki's unity government has not produced results. Earlier, the Iraqi Prime Minister was in London, where he discussed the situation with British Prime Minister Tony Blair. He said the Islamic militants trying to incite civil war in his country must be stopped. Mr. al-Maliki said his government plans to disarm the rebels responsible for the violence. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. The United Nations Children's Fund says as many as 1,200 people die every day in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The UNICEF report says more than half of those are children. A new UNICEF report also says more children under the age of 5 die in Congo each year than in China and Latin America together. The report says as many as 30,000 children were fighting or living with armed groups during the Congolese Civil War. And it says elections on July 30th will provide a chance for Congo to begin a road to peace. The days leading up to the election have not been peaceful in Congo. Angry crowds threw stones at Congolese President Joseph Kabila on Sunday. No one was reported injured. Nearly 5 years of world trade talks have ended at the World Trade Organization meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. Delegates failed to agree on ways to permit more free trade in agricultural and industrial goods. World Trade Organization Chief Pascal Lamy said hopes for an agreement are seriously threatened. European Trade Commissioner Peter Mandelson blamed the United States for the failure to reach an agreement. He said the American government refused calls to reduce its aid to farmers. A Bush administration spokesman said the talks are suspended, not ended. He said American trade officials will continue discussions with other nations in the hope of reaching an agreement. The Secretary General of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations says Burma's refusal to permit democratic reforms has damaged ASEAN. Ong Kung Yong spoke to VOA about how Burma has damaged ASEAN by not stopping human rights violations and failing to carry out democratic reforms. He said Asian leaders want Burma's military government, as a member of ASEAN, to be more helpful about the damage it has done. Malaysian Foreign Minister Syed Hamid Albar said ASEAN could no longer defend Burma unless its military government cooperates. ASEAN ministerial talks are being held in Malaysia this week. Costa Rica says it is ending legal requirements for visitors from 102 countries in an effort to increase travel and trade. Officials said many of the present rules are no longer needed. They expressed hope for more investment as a result of the change. It will permit Europeans, Asians, and Arabs to enter Costa Rica with only travel papers from their home countries. The visa restrictions in Costa Rica will remain in force for 12 countries, including Cuba, China, Iraq, North Korea, Somalia, and Sri Lanka. Briefly, here again is the major news. American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has arrived in Israel. The visit is part of her diplomatic trip concerning Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israeli troops have moved into southern Lebanon to take control of an area held by Hezbollah. And the United States has announced $30 million in aid for Lebanon. It says American forces will begin sending the supplies on Tuesday. That's the news in Special English. Jim Tedder